Hi there.
Dang it. Well, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Everything is, I'm playing producer and host. And anyway, welcome.
And talent.
Normally in this time slot is Family Matters, but one of us, I won't name names, was unable to make it. And the other person has asked another person to fill in for said person that missed. We won't name names, but Justin, you don't call him Kevin, but just call him Justin Deal. So we don't name names here at Family Matters. But anyway, we thought we'd switch it up. And we get a lot of questions about interventions. And so Justin and I will answer questions about interventions, if that sounds all right. Justin, how are you doing?
Doing well. Hey, before we do get started, I do want to just say my thoughts and prayers are with everybody down in Florida and being affected by the Hurricane Milton. I don't know if that's what impacted Kevin or not, but I know that he has, a place there, and so I'm glad. I hope all of our colleagues were able to get safely from the conference. It was shortened because of this, and all of our friends that live there are okay.
Well, we don't name names about who's not showing up and who is actually showing up to Family Matters. So, but I appreciate you calling out Kevin for not showing up. So we don't name names.
I'm pretty sure you would mention his name at least twice.
No, we didn't. No. One of us was able to make it. One of us was not able to make it. That's all I said.
Okay.
And I just said that you were filling in for Kevin. I didn't say Kevin was unable to make it. I let our audience connect.
There you go. Well, we have a smart audience.
Well, if they're followers of me, I won't say anything further. That's actually rude to my followers. I'm saying I'm not intelligent. I'm not going to rip on my followers. My followers are good people, but anyway. So, alrighty, let's get right into the. Thank you for the heartfelt message. People in Florida, I'm sure, welcome it. And so, let's talk about interventions. Justin, why don't you? All right. Let's get right into this. Let me get the questions first. This is me stalling. All right. Family dealing with 45. Our family is dealing with. So our 45-year-old brother, successful CEO, got a severe cocaine addiction. My kind of guy. I like him. I like him already. I think we could be best friends. Professional success, his personal life is unraveling, marriage is on the brink of collapse, isolating from his children. We don't know how to break through this denial. He just justifies use by pointing to his professional achievements. So reality is, and I know you've gotten it, we've all gotten it, and so kind of let's start off with a family here, obviously worried about their 45-year-old brother. Family is concerned, but they're uncertain as to how to approach. The brother's family. It sounds like his family is kind of signing off on his destructive behaviors. So you have families, brothers, siblings wanting to step in for the brother, but then also thinking maybe we're overstepping because his family isn't the one sounding an alarm. So if you got the brother of this CEO calling you, how do you walk it through it?
Yeah, no, I've gotten similar calls.
Just a good old boy. Never me.
This might be a good time to remind everybody to please mute their phones. But back to the very serious, question. You know, I had a case once where it was two brothers and a sister of the individual that was the client and reaching out, and they were concerned. The I'm not interrupting you, am I? I mean, do you need to take that?
Okay. Go ahead.
All right. But they didn't know whether or not to involve their sister-in-law or not, because what they had gotten for the last couple of years was everything's fine from her. And what sometimes families don't take it into consideration is this: the spouse had 5+ years ago at a family gathering expressed concerns about her husband, their brother's use. And it kind of fell on deaf ears. Well, it did fall on deaf ears. And we don't always consider that she is not on the front line. She was behind enemy lines against the disease. And over the last few years, she had slipped into her own codependency and enabling, which was her, survival mechanism. And so it wasn't that she didn't at one point think that there was a problem, but she had gotten to a point where to take care of herself, she was not going to, express concerns to her spouse or her in-laws. And so for a couple of reasons on that case, we left her in the dark, that we were going to have the intervention. And it turns out that that was probably a good thing, because when we did show up, she tried slamming the door on us, saying everything was fine. Fact of the matter was that this gentleman was bedridden. He was so far along in his alcoholism. She was driving into town every day to buy his bottle. But at least that in that family system was maintaining the status quo, as unhealthy as that was. The siblings, obviously, right in being concerned, and reaching out. And even though, they could not impose any financial or, boundaries or consequences, everybody, whether you're a sibling, a spouse, a child, you are entitled to your feelings. And an intervention, done properly, is a conversation about how people are feeling. And it's good to have a professional there to interrupt and reassert who has the floor and keep it as calm as possible, because it is, loved ones, emotions will, amp up. And, as the third party professional, you're there to protect everybody, the identified individual and the siblings, and to keep it on course. But yeah, I think that we often take for granted how sharing how sad we would be if we didn't have this conversation would make us. Because I did another one on a very professionally successful individual, and he was, pretty progressed, but still being able to show up for his work. And his walls were so high that after everybody had said their piece, uh, he said he wasn't going to go. And I had been observing the room, and when his daughter read her letters, there were the only set of dry eyes in the room were his and mine. And so I pointed that out to him, and I asked him to really hear what she had said. And the second time, we knocked some chinks in that wall that the disease had built up. And after she finished the second time, we asked him again if he was willing to get help, and he said that he was.
So for the brothers though, I know you kind of hit on it, but so your suggestion would be to kind of, push and move forward for the intervention. So even though that and I think there's a lot of myths and a lot of beliefs that there's got to be some heavy leverage, and there's got to be heavy consequences, and the individual has to hit rock bottom, which I don't believe in, and so forth, or ask them to leave the house, or a number of different things that you see on TV. An intervention can be done just for us, families to express their concern and so forth like that. And so, if you have siblings calling you up, what's the first couple of steps that you're going to walk them through?
Yeah, you are entitled to your feelings, and you absolutely may actually hold more cards than you realize. Also, I did an intervention where the sister was going to be 100% willing to call her brother's employer and let them know exactly what he was doing. Because, right, again, within that immediate family system, the spouse was not going to blow things up, because she was going to be the one to deal with all of the repercussions of that. But a sibling can say, yeah, you can agree to get help, and it's because I love you and I'm concerned about you. But they may also have cards that they're not aware that they could play, in that, while some people are stuck in keeping your secrets, I'm not going to be. And so,
Well, lack of talking and lack of interest doesn't always mean that they're, signing off on, you very well could get the family involved and realize that the wife is just scared to even speak up, and given enough support, the wife will easily come on your side and say, I've been worried about this for years. I just don't want to say anything because I got a house, I got kids. I don't want to be out on my own. I mean, we have a terrific life. I mean, and there's a lot of times you see people, just because they're not speaking up and just because they may be signing off on the BS of the addict alcoholic doesn't necessarily mean they just could be. There could be a lot, whether they're raised not to speak up or anything like that. So
we're saying the same thing, and those people are often still encouraged to participate in the intervention conversation. They just, depending on the situation, because you could have somebody that is so full of fear, which untreated can grow into anger, and unaddressed can grow into resentment, that, they may then play that card before we are ready to have the intervention, to go, you know what? I'm not the only one that thinks that you're a alcoholic and a coke addict. Your brothers and sisters are plotting to, come tomorrow and have a conversation about this. And so you have to be very careful on, you know, who you have, who you give the information to, before you are all set to have the conversation with the identified individual, when there is now planes that are ready, beds that are available, etc.
now you mentioned something about going to employers and so forth. There's addiction, kind of mental health, whatever we're talking about when it comes to an intervention. A lot of secrecy, whether it's with the families, with internal secret. Where are you standing on, bringing to light, the addiction and kind of what's going on and so forth? You said you had a case where they were, going to call the job and so forth. So many people want to kind of, think that that's invading of privacy. Where are you within, if you're working with a family, bringing to light, whether it's, because the family does a terrific job with keeping secrets and keeping the addiction under wraps. Now, I believe that everyone truly knows. Like, I always thought that my addiction was, crafty and cunning and no one knew. And turns out the whole world knew. My dad's company knew, everyone. I mean, but where are you to bringing to light addiction when it comes to the individuals around the family's intervention?
I'm a big fan of it. The disease lives in the shadows, right? And the more light that we can shed on a situation from as many different, perspectives or angles, the better. Um, and oftentimes, an employer, uh, you know, values the employee and has a lot of time and finance put into having that person be where they are, and and realize if this individual could you know and whether they see all of the signs of active addiction going on or some of them. Nobody, like you just said, nobody is completely naive. And I like to joke that once I agreed that I was an alcoholic and an addict, then it was unanimous. So you know I think that an employer can see expense accounts being padded and may not say something. They can see productivity dipping off. And if they can then find out, well, it's because of this. But before this had progressed, Steve or Susie was a great employee. Let's address this. And then they can go back to being the 100% great employee. And so they're often part of team, yeah, go get healthy, and we'll be here when the initial stage is over.
I think that's nice on a Hallmark card. I would love it if everyone was so receptive of substance abuse and addiction. I've seen it where people instantly go to once an addict, once an alcoholic, all like doesn't deserve to be around. I mean, and so better than anyone. It's it could cause harm. I mean, I'll just say that in simplest forms, not everyone is as receptive, and maybe it's because they grew up in an alcoholic, home or something, and have this preset resentment towards any alcoholic or addict. So, I mean, I'm not saying one way or the other. I just think that there is that there is a good share of people that look down and think when you hear addict alcoholic, think less than. And as much as we want to smash that stereotype, I mean, do you not agree that there's not everyone is like, oh my God, that is amazing. Thank you so much for admitting that. Go get help. We'll do whatever we want. There's also the people, and I've seen it, like, hey, yeah, we'll be here to support you. Why don't you go to treatment? And then they're running to the HR's office. How can we legally get rid of this guy? So, I mean, it happens. And I think that's the fear of I'm not trying to go one way or the other in here, but do you bring to light every single case?
No, it's absolutely a case by case basis. But, and as you were mentioning that, I was thinking, I've been doing this a long time, because I used to tell people before 2009, that the company could not legally take away their job if they had to go address any sort of health issue. Post, the collapse in 2009, companies could figure out a way around it, right?
There's a lot of loopholes and caveats.
Yeah, they may not let them go because they are going away for 30 days, but they may be able to and absolutely have before they left, they were padding their expense account, or they were padding, the number of hours they were actually working. And those are fireable, excuses. So, but, you could then say to the individual, well, that shoe was going to drop at some point anyway. I mean, it's a progressive disease. And, if your health, didn't take you out, you would eventually, lose this job anyway. Sometimes, it is not the worst thing for somebody to have to completely reinvent themselves.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, and there's also some industries where there's ethics in licensing and so forth like that. That it, yeah, it's good to know. I mean, always reluctant. I mean, I've done it in the past, and I completely 1,000% agree with secrets. Grow in darkness or succeed in darkness or whatever. But there's times when I find that that's kind of a last resort, and where we need to bring it to light. Now, if they're willing to accept help and kind of go, I don't think that we need to bring everything to light. Now we need to bring certain aspects to his life and the personal and family and so but
Well,
I do know that the businesses are, not all businesses. I wish they were are very receptive and like you said, admitting that they start going back and realizing all the things they could easily be fireable. So,
but I mean, here's another point, right? I mean, the intervention, families look at that possibly as the end of the journey, and you and I both know that's the beginning of the journey.
Yeah.
And the recovery actually really happens when the door is hitting you in the tuchus and you're leaving treatment. And so the more an employer is aware, the better the chances of this whole journey succeeding. I mean, you don't want somebody to, tell their boss, yeah, I'm taking a 30-day leave of absence to go find myself, and then come back and the employer be completely in the dark and have the expectations of their schedule being exactly the same, because you want this person, if they're really going to succeed, they have to, when they get home, should step down to intensive outpatient, meetings, possibly, care coordination and ongoing accountability. And if they just leave for 30 days, 90 days, or even a year, and they go back into the exact same family system, work system, then recovery doesn't have as good a chance of sticking. And so at some point, everybody should become aware of this is what's going on. And I am a believer that it's the sooner the better.
So yeah, we got questions. We there's our good friend Kevin Peterson always talks about the addict management specialist position that someone within the family always kind of begrudgingly like holds and so forth like that, and that's the one person normally they always pop up in the first 5 minutes of a phone call, normally, and who's ever the one handling everything, worrying about everything, making sure so and so is the addict management specialist, that self-proclaimed title. We have a lot of questions every week, and it goes directly into kind of the codependency and stuff. So we talk a lot about interventions, and I'm gonna turn the tables here some and say, when we think of interventions, everyone thinks about sitting around in a circle, talking with love, the addict, getting him to go to treatment. There's so much more that goes into an intervention within the family dynamics and the family support that, the individual, yes, ultimate goal on paper, success is to get individual to said treatment. success, we win, check the box, woohoo, throw a party. You know, and we all know this. The family is sick, is sometimes extremely sick for a number of reasons that we can all get into. I'm curious to pose this question. So, have you, like, when you see a very, very sick family, there's got to be, is there work that goes into working with the family before an intervention can be done? Everyone that calls normally wants that intervention done yesterday and so forth. But are there times when you slow the process down and you get the family better prepared for the intervention?
Again, hopefully there's nobody out there that's just doing a cookie cutter. I get a call and I'm on an airplane within 4 hours, every case. There are some situations out there where, because of what the drug of choice is and how prevalent fentanyl is in just about anything anymore, you don't want to push off having the conversation. And another aspect of that is, it's whether it was 14, 15 years ago when I first started doing that, or yesterday, what is common is you get a call from a family member, that primary family member that is trying to manage everything, and a situation, a specific event has taken place that pushes them out of their comfort zone of feeling like I can actually manage this, and they reach out to a third party stranger. And so you then want to take a look at what that event was, and is that going to be such a key thing that we want to strike while the iron is hot, that the disease, not necessarily the individual, can argue that more than they could brush off other previous events. And everything okay there?
We're getting a lot of questions. Keep going.
Okay.
You get distracted easily.
Well, you came in almost to the camera.
Well, I got a lot of, it's real easy for you to be the guest and just sit in that chair. I got 4 screens. Looks like 11 different questions and comments.
All right.
People think that I'm very inspiring. They specifically said Jay. I don't know. I'll put you in that same category.
Yeah.
We'll eliminate the name Jay and just say we are very inspiring. So keep going.
All right. So, you do sometimes want to still act as quickly as possible. But what comes with experience is knowing, okay, we've got to find out, where there's a bed available within the next couple of days, to, hey, we should, slow this down a heartbeat or two, make sure that we have all of the best team members are available, whether that's in person or virtually, and that we have the best, facility or program for this individual, which then also requires, oftentimes, transportation and all sorts of other, pieces. And so you don't want to get caught up in the family members panic and rush the process. But there is something to be said about also not putting this off another 2 weeks or a month.
Well, this is good, but let's talk about the sick families. You know better than anyone. If you, let's just say, for instance, you get that phone call, you're on a plane within 4 hours. All right, and then you're doing what? The family pre-intervention that night and so forth. There's a chance that there's a lot of things under the surface that are not, that you're not aware of, that could easily derail or come bubbling up, that take the precedent over that intervention, whether it's family resentments, it's other people's using, it's, I've had, you've seen it all, where family members are using together secretly. People are, funding and not, realizing there's, resentments within families. There's people that not wanting to talk to each other within families. There's, the addiction and all the things that go along with it. Some family members are still resentful of what the addict alcoholic did. Is there is there time when you get that phone call and you just get this sense that this family has a lot going on, and it's almost as if there's been times when, 2 or 3 phone calls in and Zoom calls, whatever it may be, and you start getting all the, you're not even bringing up, you're not even having the individual, the family members are just, basically you got to get a grasp on the family secrets, the family resentments, the family whatever going in. So do you ever have those times when you kind of just slow it down and you need to work on the family before an intervention can even, happen? Or do you always just go right into it?
Well, so I don't know if I can't recall over the last few years at least where I've gotten a call and I've been on a plane later that day. There are a couple of days at least of conversations, but you have to also take into consideration, are some of these other family secrets or resentments as life threatening as untreated addiction that has gotten to a point where a family is reaching out for professional help? And am I experienced enough to navigate those things coming up during the intervention and giving them the credence that they deserve, but also saying they're not as urgent as addressing the substance use?
Well, there's one of my very first interventions that I've ever really done outside of shadowing numerous people, yourself included. I mean, it was, I still go back to it, and it's a family that really, really needed to intervene on their son, and mid-30s son or whatever like that. The son worked for the dad, and I mean, was, married, the wife, everything. I mean, everything was in line for an intervention. And through this process of just checking in with the family, I quickly realized dad was unwilling to do anything job related. Wasn't going to, threaten the firearm, wasn't going to bring it to light within, and so, was made it very clear that he believes his son needs help, but even though his work life is suffering, dad's covering for him nonstop. I can only imagine that office was, oh my God. Like, I had similar situations where I started working for my dad, and I can tell you on the other side, going back and making the amends, there's a lot of that tornado that rips through the office and so forth. And so I wasn't going to do an intervention until I was very clear that the dad was able to hold boundaries and was willing to, put some healthy boundaries in as far as with work relations and work around it. And we did that. Finally, it took maybe a month for dad to finally come around, and some things more and more likely within his addiction, it became evident that he was going to get arrested, which was going to throw away his whole career because there's licensing that goes along with it. So we finally got dad on board, able to do the intervention, and the kid still, went to treatment, is actually still sober to this day. I actually go back to that and wonder, was that God that put me in, that thought in like, hey, I need to get dad on board before doing an intervention? Because, and I thought of, I called some people and maybe even called you on it. And a lot of the talk was, well, family's ready, go do it, get it, and there was just something in the back of my mind that says, and there's been similar situations. I'm just curious as to, sometimes you need family members to kind of be ready to set some healthy boundaries and go forward before an intervention can be successful. I think, and I could be wrong, and this is why we do shows, and this is why I throw out ideas and people, but I believe that an intervention can be set up for failure if the family isn't prepared. And I agree with you. There's a lot of times there's several days that go into it, and then there's a pre-intervention meeting, the night before, and a lot goes into it, and you prepare the family the best you can. And sometimes you just got to roll the dice. But knowing, has there ever been something that has come up that you've delayed an intervention within the family?
No. Shout out to Gene Campbell and Action Institute, that I've sat in on a couple of her lectures at conferences, and some of the skills that they use, right, I have implemented into that roughly 2 hour planning meeting the day before the intervention. And some of that includes actual physical, like moving around and, standing in different spots depending on where you feel about this. And that has told me a lot more than like the family member that is, not on board, and can't verbalize that, but then does in a physical activity. And I have had, uh, you know, parents, that shared during the planning meeting, I don't know if I can say this or say that. And instead of saying, well, I need to, you know, convince this one person that they need to join and see things the way these other, 5 or 6 other loved ones and family members see things before we can have the conversation. I told that mom, then I don't know if I can have you there tomorrow during the intervention. And that got her attention and everybody else's attention even deeper level. And she leaned in more on how urgent it was to have the conversation. She also didn't want to be left out on it. Then also as the interventionist, uh, you know, I had to assess as we continued the planning meeting, if she was going to be able to, be firm enough, because you and I both know, and a lot of people out there, this chain is only as strong as its weakest link, and the disease is going to know which one out there is the weak link. And so she had shifted enough, and then it was my job to also hide her in, between two really strong messages as well. And so, she was still not willing to say that, if you say no and your wife kicks you out of the house and your kids say that, they're not going to, be part of your life, you can still come and stay at my house. But she was able to shift enough where that message, coupled with what everybody else was going to be willing to change, what boundaries they were going to put in place if he continued to keep using, he agreed to go that day.
Does your heart just give a beat anytime that someone goes away from their letters, right? Like they put the letters down and you sort of like all of a sudden they want to, like, they go unplugged, like improv, and you're like, you know what? Why don't you just use that letter? It's kind of like, an outline, and they're like, "Oh well, I'll just keep looking." I was like, "Well, why don't you just read it word for word?" Because sometimes within the intervention, like you could get. I just, whoo, have you had situations where family members throw that curveball within the midst of an intervention?
Oh yeah.
We've all had it.
Yeah. And
But there's nothing like having someone being like putting the letter down, and you're just like, well, maybe why don't you read the letter? Like you put a lot of time and energy into it.
Well, and yes, at least one, if not a couple. And I remember an intervention down in Miami where the husband, was the point person, and his two daughters were part of the team, and we were intervening on their mom and his wife, and he disregarded the instructions completely and didn't have any letter. And he just thought, I've been thinking about what I was going to say for the last at least few months. And he just was rattling off extremely shameful events. And at one point, he brought up one thing that made her kind of roll her eyes, but it wasn't like, uh, I can't believe you're making a big deal about that. It was more, I can't believe you're bringing up that event in front of our daughters. And he saw the eye rolling, and he just started, pointing the finger literally and yelling at her. And that's where, again, it is our job as the interventionist to protect everybody in the intervention. And I had to sit him down because he had stood up and, say, this is why. um, One of the many reasons I asked you to write the letter is because if you're just doing this, purely from memory, you're going to get more emotionally amped up, and this isn't going to be as productive. So yeah, it is definitely a heartbeat or two, because there's more than just holding the mirror up to the facts of what you're seeing the disease do to the individual or the family system. Uh, there has to be portions of it that are of love, of hope, and yeah. So
Well, I mean, intervention is a conductor. I mean, so forth. There's the lack of letter reading. The lack. I mean, not not even doing a letter is whatever it is. But there's also been situations where like you got as an interventionist, you control and you can kind of get a good energy and a feel for the room. There's been times when let's just talk. I mean, like I always talk about the letter. It's also you have the individual on your side starting to look in their heart and soul, and then out of nowhere, out of right field, someone will say something that just takes the emotion out of the room and gets them back to being resentful, or like a poke or something like that. And so I think there's an extreme importance within the intervention, and the reason why you bring in intervention is that they're trained, they've seen it. There's a conductor. It's kind of you go, you go, you go. You can kind of you're a traffic guard. Like you come forward, you stay the and there's so many times when I make it very clear, hey, if you have something to say, like we'll get to you, but don't just start throwing. I've had it numerous times when it's like, all right, we got him, we got him, we got her, we got her, we got her. Someone throws out a resentment, and we got to spend another 45 minutes on getting her back into seeing the need to go into help. So there's a deep, I always say I'm a traffic guard and kind of a conductor around that circle, and it's not a free for all. It's not an open Q&A. Let's all have some organization between it.
yeah, I want to say it was the second intervention I ever did. I was still being supervised, and it was friends, siblings, and the only surviving parent. And from the planning meeting, to what you were kind of mentioning earlier, I knew that there was some history, shall we say, between the the sisters and the identified individual. That was, certainly some issues. And so, again, part of the intervention is picking the order that people are going to read their letters. And that's different than necessarily maybe, the seating arrangement. And so I had the two best friends go first. And from their letters, the woman, was seeming like, she was at a spot of surrendering. And so I, as the, conductor, paused the intervention and I explained exactly. I said, we hadn't really discussed what the plan is. There's a bed waiting for you at this, treatment center. It's a beautiful campus. And here are the other things that are all, lined up in order. And then I sort of paused and she said, I'll go, which I kind of was suspecting, right? And so I said, great, let's get up and let's start packing a bag. And because I was being supervised, some of the feedback that I got, later that day, was that I had, stolen the opportunity from the two sisters and the mom to say, their part. And on some level, I, to this day, disagree that I should have had them read their whole letters. But ever since that moment, I do concede that, maybe reading the part of how, why they love their sibling, and what they will do to support. So they could have had part of their voices heard, and then down the road, when this person was on the journey of getting healthy, they could have circled back and addressed the other parts of their letter.
I mean, you got a yes. I mean, I think, and like I said, like once you get a yes, get up, hug, and spring into action. We're not, no offense, if you have not read your letter, we can send the letters with them and they can read them on the plane or while they're in treatment, whatever it may be. But, once they get a yes, it's happened the first letter. Like, yes, I'll go. There's been times when someone has walked in and said, oh, knew this was coming. All right, I'll go. And no one read their letters or anything like that. And I was like, okay. And I remember some of the family members like, well, I put 2 hours into this letter writing. What do you mean? Walked in the room and said yes. I said, well, you know what you need to do? Put in an envelope. Let's give it to me. We'll start reading it on the plane. We'll let them read it while in treatment. That's not an all for naught. There's a lot of love within that letter. There's never a bad time for someone to hear I love you. So,
well, a couple of points to that though is, I hope I would say that I hope that you found the letter writing process therapeutic in itself.
Yeah.
But you also do want to remember, I mean, one of the things that I tell families is that the intervention is as much, if not more so, for them. And so you want to make sure that, again, I always do this, the disease, not the specific individual, knows that they have done, that the family or the team has done some work, because you don't want the individual to say yes and not, give anybody that on the team their voice, and then have the individual get there to treatment wherever it is and go, oh, this is hard, or I didn't realize I was going to have to give up marijuana also. I'm checking out. So you want them to know that
the boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but that can easily be done, whether like, hey, this is what you're signing up for. And, when they say yes, I was like, well, thank you for saying yes, but let's be clear on what you're agreeing to. And this is X amount of days within treatment. This is X, the boundaries that are put in place.
Well, and it's not that you're going to go away for X amount of days. It's that you are willing to begin to do some work. And if at any point along this journey you detract from that, then some of these boundaries or all of these boundaries will go into effect at that time.
Yeah. Well, it's not a threat, but I
No.
get the yes, and then I outline it. But I mean, the bags are packed. We're not here to talk much. We'll get clear on the boundaries and what you're agreeing to. But
Yeah.
I'm out.
And there's a reason that I'm also always the designated person to travel with the individual and not, a family member or friend, or at least not only a family member or friend, because I've had some where they did travel along with us. But yeah, you want to make sure that you're there to reiterate all of that on the journey.
All right. Well, we've gone way past our 30 minutes.
Yeah.
So we got to go. We're getting kicked out.
All right.
So always a pleasure.
Thanks for
See
having
ya, Justin.